Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to the Wisdom of Alison Covington. I'm super interested to be having this conversation with Alison today because she is one of those people that had a very successful career in the corporate world, and a successful year, I'm sure, but a very successful career in the corporate world, and then made the deliberate, intentional shift into, what we would call the not-for-profit sector. Although I'm sure we'll have conversations as we go through the interview about that term, not-for-profit, and really turned her skills and talents towards doing good things in the community through Good360. And we'll unpack that story in a minute. But I do want to highlight some things, Alison, before we get going. So before you started Good360, you'd had a successful career with a background in retail and IT. And I know from our pre-chat that IT was probably important in terms of what Good360 actually is, and even public transport. You've been a managing director for a long time. And I guess, like a lot of people at senior levels, maybe started to feel the sense of, what is this really actually doing? And is there something more and something greater? And I know you found out about Good360 from a newsletter, and it was already existing in the US. But I just want to make sure I get some of these facts right, because you're awarded Western Sydney Woman of the Year, Western Sydney Community Woman of the Year, Not-for-Profit Third Sectors Award CEO of the Year, and an AM in the Order of Australia, which is not something many people in Australia get to do. But just think about some of the achievements of Good360. Supported 4,000 charities and schools, $400 million of goods donated by leading Australian businesses, 40 million plus items donated to Australians who needed them most, 500 and more partners across homewares, office and school supplies, clothing, toys, bath, body and nappy, including Big W, Nike, Harvey Norman, Colgate, Optus, SC Johnson, Lego, King Living, BIC, Best and Less, and the list goes on. And, if you were working in marketing, Alison, showing people how to get connected to the big companies to make a sale, you'd probably have a career doing that as well, because that's a blue chip list, right, of people to have on the Good360 supply chain. So this is a significant career shift and a significant set of achievements. And I am really looking forward to how we unpack the wisdom of that and the stewardship of that. So Alison, welcome to the Wisdom of.
Well, thank you so much. It's very humbling to hear you say that. But of course, you can't do that without a team of people. We're a small team, but we're a mighty team. And I think it comes down to people just being really passionate about being able to use their skills for good. And as you say, it's often what we describe as crossing over. So people like to use their skills for good in society, and they've often had fantastic careers in corporate, but then they go, what is my legacy? What can I do for the world? And they want to cross over and do something that's more purposeful, and the opportunity to give back. And through Good360 Australia, we've created that opportunity to be able to give back to society. That's good for both people and the planet. And I think that's really quite fulfilling. And then, as you said, it's quite blue chip, because then lots of businesses also want to have the opportunity to help out in their community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you led us right off the gate into, a theme I constantly notice as I interview people for this show. And, by definition, we're looking for the people that want to make a much bigger difference than just profit, which is why that term not-for-profit is kind of interesting. But, all of the leaders that I find myself spending time with actually have a degree of humility about them. And almost every single one of them says, well, I've got a great team. Like it's very early on, if it's not the first thing that they say. But teams need someone to start them. And teams need someone to anchor them. Teams, people, and I suspect this is true when you start a Good360, whenever you do something new, you're actually leading a team of people into chaos. to try and figure out how to make it work, right? And
Every day.
every day, right? And one of the things that allows people to go into chaos willingly is the sense of courage that they glean from the leader, and it's leadership courage that quite often allows people to step into chaos willingly. I'm interested in the thought process you went through and the courage, maybe, or maybe it wasn't courage, you just knew you had to do something when you decided, I'm going to step away from this successful career in the business world. I'm still going to be doing probably the kind of business I'm doing, but I'm going to do it in organizations for good, if we don't want to use the term not for profit. And I think we should talk about the term not for profit after we find out about that transition that you made and the thought process behind it.
I describe it as that you can't unknow something. So, when I read about Good360 operating in the US, the scale that it was operating in, it was $7 billion worth of goods were being matched up to over 50,000 charities. My corporate career was all about scale. It was all about mergers and acquisitions, but it was about that need. And I couldn't unknow that here in Australia, we weren't having that ability to do that here. And then, when you're a doer, you can't sort of sit back and wait for somebody else to do that. Good360 had operated since 1983. In Australia, when I had that light bulb moment, it was 2012. And so I come back to, and I always go, I'm a bit nervous to say this, but I was in high school when Good360 operated in the US. And so then when I discovered it here in Australia, I'd had a successful corporate career, I'd had education, I had employment. And I went, how many Australians missed out on that opportunity? Because billions of dollars of goods didn't make it to them. And also, how much landfill did we have in Australia and how much damage were we doing to our country?
Yeah, right.
So that unknowing didn't sit comfortably with me. And then I got really, I just couldn't sit there and allowing that knowledge to fill my head up. And then being a doer, it was one of those things that, it's so annoying. I actually have to do something about it. So being that leader, not necessarily having all the skills, I was going to be the person who was going to be the one that led people into the crazy, into the vision, and then take people on that journey. So, the leader doesn't necessarily have to have all the skills. It helps to have the passion and the vision, but who else is going to cross over and come and join the journey with me? And that's what we constantly do is, we take people on this, very collaborative journey to say who wants to be part of this legacy, who's going to make this change, because it's just not acceptable. And together we can change this.
That's super interesting. First of all, I think you should claim that you were in high school when Good360 started in the US, because I'd been working for a few years. So I think you should claim the high school thing. It's interesting. I've had conversations with people about, if we tried to define the difference between stewardship and leadership, what might it be, right? And I first started talking about stewardship 15 years ago with corporate Australia, and it wasn't really a conversation that people were ready to have. But the more I've had that conversation recently, I've started to notice that leaders want to fill that leadership role, and they go and find a responsibility that they can meet in order to fill that leadership role. I'm starting to notice that the people that I would think of as stewards, and you're one of them, find that the responsibility comes to them and almost demands that they meet the responsibility. And sometimes they push it away for a little while, but it just keeps occupying your mind, and then you simply can't ignore it. You have to do something. And
it's burning, and it's just becomes that so unsettling that it's just like, if it's not you, then who is it? And then you're going to gather your crew. And, I say to my team constantly, there was nobody uniquely qualified to start this here in Australia. So don't fear that you don't know how to do this job or that you're not qualified to do the job, because nobody else started it. Like, we were, 40, 35 years behind the US. And generally in Australia, you're a few years behind international trends, but not decades. So it was on us. Well, let's give it a go, because nobody else did. So let's give ourselves a title and get on with doing the job.
And, there's a lot of people leading some big organizations that are still not uniquely qualified to do it. So
that's why I said, let's just do it, because, we've actually changed the lives of 4 million Australians by taking that leap of faith. And I go, what have we got to lose? And I keep saying to the team, there's no fear of failure. We'll get back up and have another go tomorrow and another go the next day. And, 4 million lives have been changed because we were not too scared to do it.
So that's interesting. What have we got to lose? Time, maybe a bit of credibility.
Reputation.
Yeah, maybe a bit of, I was just about to say, maybe a bit of credibility, right? But what are the 4 million Australians got to lose if you don't do it?
And that's what I had a talk at one of our partners' lunches yesterday, and I said, there was kids sleeping on the floor, and your mattresses got them off the floor. And me making this leap and asking you to come and partner with us means these kids are no longer sleeping on the floor.
Yeah,
And that's what we had to lose, was we changed the lives of that family and those 4 kids that were sleeping on the
yeah.
floor. And that's
And
our
your risk in asking them to partner was a bit of embarrassment if they said no. The risk if you didn't do it was the kids sleeping on the floor. And these are such simple things that most people take for granted, so often. So can we talk about this term not for profit for a little bit? We had a little chat about this before we started the show, and I get why it's called not for profit. It really should be called not for shareholder gain, but there's
it's a
all
long
different.
term that.
Yeah, but there's all different kinds of currency,
Yeah.
right, that you could use to define profit. And you know, uh, safe, comfortable shelter is a form of currency. That is a profit that's being created, for that family, and the children aren't sleeping on the floor. Food for the day is a currency. That is a profit that's being created. So, the term not for profit can be a bit misleading. And these organizations aren't just waiting for handout. They've got to kind of make an effort. So I'd love to kind of not kind of, I really would love to dig into how you view the space, particularly
Yeah.
that you operate in, and explore some of that from your
Yeah.
perspective.
So, we say we're a very sophisticated organization. So we're an online marketplace where charities can shop 24/7. So that's very sophisticated technology.
Mm,
You consider it the eBay for charities. So it takes, a very sophisticated technology team, sales and marketing team that's, a very technical two-sided marketplace to keep
yes.
too much goods coming in and not too much goods going out. So that's a very technical business structure. And then there's transport and logistics and everything that goes with that. But what we do is we just happen to keep reinvesting every bit of profit that we have. So as you said, it's not for shareholder profit, is that we just reinvest everything we have to scale. So everything
Mm,
that keeps coming back in, we reinvest it, put more back into it, and keep growing. So we're never satisfied to stay at the level we are, because the research that we did was saying that there's, $2.5 billion worth of goods going to waste here in Australia. There's close to $800 billion worth of goods going to waste in the US. So no matter what Good360 does in every country, and the same figures are the same in UK and in Europe, that the amount of goods that are available to
mm,
people living in poverty means that we can never sit on our cash reserves. We have to keep investing it. So whether it's a disaster or a global pandemic, there's always somebody in need. So we can't disperse those profits. We have to reinvest it. So
yeah.
when I started it, I looked at the company structure and said, could we be a social enterprise? Could we be for profit? But it was like, well, whatever we make, we have to invest back into the people who are in poverty, or what we describe in challenging times.
Yes.
Because those times change. Sometimes it's a fire, a flood, a global pandemic, a cost of living crisis. We have to keep scaling to reinvest back into those people.
Yeah. And I think the shift in language is important. Humans need to be able to get a word for something, to hold the concept in our minds. And the difference between social enterprise as opposed to not-for-profit or charity, brings a very different thought process about the level of leadership, the level of sophistication, the level of business smarts brought to the table, and everything else. Can you give me those numbers again of products going to waste? I mean, let's not just blow past that.
It's billions. It's billions and trillions around the world. And that's what I keep saying to every CEO I talk about, is like, do you want to invest in solving the trillions of dollars of goods that can resolve these challenging times across the world? And if we work together with global multinationals that have goods, whether they're spare or if they purposely want to work to get these goods to the people who need them. And globally, we can do that together. And that's what it comes down to, is there's so many challenges globally that we can work together. And that's what I keep coming back to. We're at the technology and the logistics system to get the goods where they're needed.
And was it 800 million in the US?
Billion, B,
Billion.
B for
800
billion.
billion. And how much in Australia?
So it's 2.5 billion that's wasted, but these numbers keep growing because we then look at the returns market. So, if you look at e-commerce, goods have been returned, and so they then go back into the waste stream as well. So
Yeah, so because
as
that's all in
consumers,
landfill, right?
as consumers, we just keep making more available that we can repurpose.
Yeah, wow. It's a staggering thing just to pause on, isn't it, for a second? So, uh, double-sided. A, it's not going to people that could really, really use it and could never afford to buy it. Um, and then the waste and landfill and impact on the planet environmentally that comes out of that. How do you measure? So one of the things that business leaders often struggle with, increasingly, right? Particularly as find your why and business for purpose, and unfortunately, a lot of businesses use the whole idea of purpose as a marketing hook. Oh, here's our purpose. This is what we're trying to do, impact the world. And then there are businesses that really actually have to make profit, shareholder return, but want to have a bigger impact elsewhere. And I suspect you've thought through this notion of how do you measure the impact of Good360 Australia very deeply. What are some of the things that you think through when you start to think about impact, and how would we measure that? Obviously you've got the numbers. We put this many goods back into play, but how else do you think about impact in terms of Good360 and what you're doing?
I think the world's starting to get a bit more sophisticated. Like when I first looked at this, like I was just horrified that there was people who were in need and we weren't matching this up. So I think I was a little bit before businesses in terms of their willingness to want to come on this journey.
Yes,
And we had CSR as a term back when I was starting this. But I
yes,
think now ESG is
yeah,
helping businesses have to play a role. CSR was more of it's a nice to have. ESG is you must have. And so from a shareholder point of view, it's taken businesses on a journey that they don't have a choice about.
mm,
So the models of Good360 is allowing that from that environmental point of view is to help businesses measure their environmental impact. So we can talk about the goods going back through to society. And then the S, the societal piece, is helping businesses do that. So we can measure that with them as well. And then it's like shareholders need to know that. But importantly, teams want to know the good that they're doing, and they can also tell their customers. So I think this
mm,
is a really important thing, is that through Good360, and that's why I was presenting to one of our partners yesterday, their teams were so proud of the good work they do. So that
mm.
actually helps them have a better retention and employment strategy. It's like, come and work for this organization because they're so proud of the work they do. And then they take it to the next step of saying, hey, customers, this is the good work we do in the communities where we work and live. So the ESG, I think, is becoming increasingly important in many countries. And I think that's a really good thing. And as we talk about people and planet, I think measuring and reporting that is more important to businesses than it was when we first started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just have this belief that free enterprise is one of the most powerful forces for good on the planet if the right people are leading them. Um, and every business could find a place to play. You might not have a lot of you might not be a tangible products business with goods that are going to waste, but every business can find a place to play if you actually go searching for organizations like Good360 that are filling a very specific role to be able to get the impact that you want to have to the place where it's most needed. I think that's one of the great challenges, is what is the mechanism in between to take goodwill and turn it into real on the ground benefit. And that's what I think. Good360 is such a fascinating organization in that regard. So you're a technology company. We probably can't have a conversation in today's world without talking about technology and AI and things like that. And obviously people have views about AI. It's the greatest threat to mankind, or it's the greatest gift to mankind, or it's both. Let's not get into that debate. But what technology trends do you see emerging, and particularly in this in the social enterprise space?
Yeah. And so, we talked about the excess. And so many businesses partner with us besides tangible goods, as you're talking about. So, we have media companies who partner with us for their excess media. So we might get outdoor media space, or we get print space or radio space and things like
Mm,
that. And then we also get the same with logistics and warehousing space and things like that. And then the same with technology. So we have technology companies who give us, free or reduced software licenses, etc., so that we can build out our technology. So I think that's where that emerging technology coming is really important. For not-for-profits to keep up with that advanced technology. It's very hard with our limited budgets
Yes.
compared to many businesses. So I think that's a really interesting space. And being a two-sided marketplace, we've got customers that we need to have the best of the technology to keep up with that space, because that's emerging and evolving so quickly. And just the simple thing is, our online chat. You've seen so many marketplaces evolve that for customers. So to have, a customer support team doing that versus have an AI intervene in those sorts of spaces. So I think, like all businesses, we're looking for ways that we can reduce our labor costs and bring in AI for some of those things. But the not-for-profit sector, like a lot of businesses, are going, well, where's that additional writing coming in that we can reduce writing? And the not-for-profit sector is looking at that for grant writing,
Yes.
and many places like that. So just like all businesses, we're looking to go, is it viable? Is it useful? Or, is it actually not for our sector?
Sure.
So we're all testing it like every other industry as well.
Yep. Well, and we're making a lot of stuff up on the way as well. You just sparked a thought. You have customer service teams, real people who are helping customers who are these are charities typically. Can people, the individuals, go through the charities to get the various goods and things like that? That human service level must be a pretty important thing to have to try and drive with the right kind of tone and cultural feel and everything else in the space that you're operating in. What are some of the things that you have either intuitively or consciously done as a leader to really get the tone right for how Good360 Australia shows up in the human form?
Yeah, our values is kindness, collaboration, integrity, and innovation. And I think, our team absolutely always lead with kindness. And that comes through with our team in terms of our customer support, our customer service, our customer success team. The charity industry, the charities we support, over 4,000 charities and schools, they're really time poor. But they really need what we can provide to them. So our customer success team are the most amazing humans you'll ever meet. But they're very innovative to be able to just go out to our charities and go, do you need these goods? And really know them well. And so I think that customer support of personalizing and understanding the customer is really important. And I think it's just absolutely amazing what we know about our customers, to be able to reach out to them, to remind them that they actually do need the goods. And I think that personalized service is absolutely credible for such a small team to do a really big support level, which you would never get from a normal sort of customer support team.
No. So let's talk about kindness for a moment, because I think kindness, and let me, in full disclosure, one of our 4 core values in our business is be kind. And the definition of that is demonstrate kindness and be complaint free. And quite a few years ago, I came across, I was doing some work with an executive team, and I came across this thing called the complaint free challenge. And so you wear a wristband and you try and go complaint free for 21 days. Now, it's a complaint if it comes out of your mouth. And if you complain, you have to swap wrists, and you start your 21 days again. And I'm a pretty positive person, but it took me 8 months to get to my first 21 days.
That's interesting.
And a couple of things happen. The first thing that happens is you realize actually how much you complain. And then the second thing that happens when you get to about day 15 is you actually start seeing the world quite differently. And actually the antidote to complaint is to be kind. So if your first thought is kindness as opposed to complaint, you start to operate differently in the world. And I think it's a superpower for any business team. I'd love you to dig in on kindness a little bit, because it's not a common value in a lot of corporations. And I think business leaders might be surprised how much of a difference it makes when you do get that to run through your operation. I'd love you to dig in on kindness as one of your organizational values.
Yeah, and I think that's like sometimes you might be trying to negotiate a deal, and we don't necessarily hold all the power when we're the charity, and it's not about being competitive. It's about how can we do this transaction with kindness. So leading with purpose first is going, where is the win-win for everybody here?
Mm.
And I think often people don't think about that when we're actually trying to do business with somebody. And it's really, the second value around collaboration is people are often very skeptical when you're coming to them with kindness and collaboration, because they're like, oh, aren't we supposed to be competitors? And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, actually, our purpose is to help people and planet. Why can't we all come to the table and lead with the purpose first? And that's not natural when you could be natural enemies or competitors in business, and you're just like, but we're trying to help people here. And I think that's a really interesting different shift for businesses to say, well, if we all come together, we can grow the pie rather than compete for the pie. And it takes a lot to get people to understand when I'm knocking on their door to collaborate with kindness. It's very skeptical, but we get there in the end.
So it's interesting, the term win-win is thrown around a lot, or the triple win. And one of the conversations that people have, one of the thought processes people have to go through is that you cannot get to win-win until you first make sure no one loses. And that's a first step. And that's a very hard thought process for a lot of people to go through. But you can't get to win-win until you reach a point where you can acknowledge that we've got to make sure no one loses. And, let's collaborate to grow the pie, rather than compete inside the pie. So much of the waste we experience is as a result of unnecessary competition.
Yeah.
A level of competition drives motivation, but unnecessary competition. And I think there's just something when you rattled off the numbers about wasted product, it just, let's at least make sure we don't throw any of the pie out. I mean, even if we don't grow the pie, let's just
Yeah.
make sure we don't throw any of it out, and waste it.
And sort of, if I can just explain that too, like those two parts of the pie is everybody set up in competition. So the people who are throwing out the pie are natural competitors because they're businesses who are competing for the customers' dollars. And then the industries that have perhaps collecting the waste are also natural competitors. If they're not for profits, they're being squeezed for any particular part of funding. So that, they're fighting for the funding dollar. So not for profits, so, never got enough resources, never got enough funding. They have to pitch for funding. So they're natural competitors.
Yeah.
So to go on those two sides of the marketplace and say, let's all grow the pie together, they're under-resourced to be friendly in those sorts of arenas, because
Yes.
there's not enough resources, not enough funding. And, the people who are throwing out the goods have, in really tough retail conditions, have exhausted it down and never got any dollars for it. So they're competitive for that customer dollar. So it's a really hard conversation. It sounds good in principle, but it makes no sense because they're competing for survival, basically.
And, most nice ideas sound good in principle and are much harder to execute, which is why we tend to default as a species to, fight and flight, compete and everything else, because it takes a deeper level of thought and wisdom and insight and conversation. And one of the challenges is you actually have to slow down the dialogue to allow that deeper conversation to occur. And we live in an impatient, fast tips, tricks, hacks, kind of world that we're in. So, and probably it's timely for us to everyone bashes the big corporations, and these money-making machines and everything else, but we shouldn't lose sight of Big W, Harvey Norman, Colgate, Optus. We shouldn't lose sight of the size of companies that probably in many respects are just quietly channeling these goods to you and having you dispense them through the marketplace. It is just not a reasonable proposition to assume every large company, every multinational, every large organization has just done this off the back of stripping everything out of the community that possibly can. I meet so many senior leaders in companies who are fundamentally good people, but we don't have the time for the conversations, we don't have the tools or the marketplaces or the mechanisms to run it through. I'd love to find out a little bit more about Alison, and get some of the leadership lessons out of that. Are there any pivotal moments or someone you met or had a conversation with where you can identify back to, and there might not be, it could have been a gradual thing, where you really just knew, okay, this burning that I can't avoid now requires action. And there was a pivotal conversation or a moment or something where you went, that's it, I'm going, here we go. Was there anything that leapt out?
So I think it was the fact that, all the businesses had solutions for food waste. Around the world, food waste was being taken care of by charities and for many, many decades. And so when you sort of think about that, knocking on the doors of these businesses who hadn't had a scalable, frictionless, seamless solution. And these are big businesses. So, if they had volumes and they needed to donate that, the little charity who's going to take a box isn't a solution for them. Most of these big businesses, when they're ready to exit goods, it's pallets, it's truckloads, it's big volume. And so, for somebody to come along and go, hey, I'm setting up this system, and we can take it by the pallet, truckload, warehouse full. For them, it's just like, really? You can talk my language. My teams can work with you at your language. Whereas when they've had to make these decisions because something didn't sell through, or they just really want to do good, they can't talk to the little church organization or
No.
the community organization. And, they're talking at a language people that need to talk like them.
Yeah.
So it seems like people go, oh, they'll never do that. But if you provide a frictionless solution, these businesses are very generous, but also they're very time poor. They
Yes.
can talk to 1,000 charities and distribute one carton at a time. So it really does work for them. And they are very generous. So the logic's there, but it's then, as you said, everybody's very busy. You have to have timings, everything as well. So sometimes, the planets just have to align that when if somebody actually has a problem of stock that didn't move and you make the phone call at the right time, it does align.
Yeah. Time, I talk a lot about time. Time and timing always wins. We end up in 2025, whether we choose to or not, because time always wins and timing matters, and time compounds everything. Things that are going bad will continue to get worse as time goes on, or things that are going good will continue to get better if you stay focused on them. You made a really interesting comment. People are often generous, but it's hard to be generous. If you can make generosity easier, people are often willing to, yeah, I'll do it, or I'll provide it, or I'll give it to you. But I'm time poor. I'm already working really, really hard. It's plaguing the back of my mind that we waste all these products. I'd love to give them to somebody, but it's just too hard. It's outside my bandwidth.
Yep.
I'm maxed out. And if someone comes along and says, you almost don't have to do anything, how easy could that be?
It's like I keep saying, we take the friction out of the simple
Sure.
system. And so what we say is what we do is very complex, but we want to make it simple for them. So they don't have to know about all the things that are going on in the background. We just say, hey, look, we're a one-stop shop for you. We'll do that. And then we'll disperse it to thousands of charities, and we'll come back with the beautiful stories for you to tell your customers and your employees, but we'll try not to tell you about all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, because that's our problem, not yours. Sometimes that works better than other times, but that's what we have to set up to try and take the complex out of it for them. And they appreciate that.
So if they've got good inventory management and they can point you to the pile of goods that they're going to get rid of, you can take the problem off their hands. So super interesting. Sometimes about how long will this take? Well, how quickly can you sign the document? It's let's go. So what are some core principles of leadership that you believe you've displayed that have really carried the team through, courageously carried the team into this chaos, and carried your partners into it as well? People follow leaders before they follow a crusade or a purpose. And so what are some of the core principles of leadership that you've really invested in to try and display that you think have carried people in with you?
I think it's building that level of trust, because I think people need to trust in their leader. And I think it's just, having that level of trust that people can respect that, and having that rapport with people. So
Mhm.
that honesty, I think, is really important. And I'm pretty straightforward. I say it like it is. So I will give people the answer that, needs to be said, whether it's, we'll have those crucial conversations when they need to be said. And then I think it's just, we get on with the job. There's no fear of failure. So just tell me what needs to be said, and then we can actually resolve whatever's there. We have a bit of fun along the way, so it's not all serious. But I think that's the thing, is like, we keep coming back to that kindness. And then it's just, I'm quite hands in as well. So I understand what people are saying. I've worked through the businesses, as you said, I've had that background. So I tend to understand and try and resolve the issues with the people, but also that very big picture visionary type
Mm.
leader, but also prepared to pivot. And we love a pilot at Good360. So we're often piloting things and then scaling from there. So I think people appreciate that we don't have to do everything perfect the first time. We'll give something a pilot, and then we'll scale it from there. So that type of style of leadership, I think, has been appreciated by the team.
Well, it's interesting because piloting, testing, trial run, whatever language you want to use, has sort of disappeared from the business vocabulary. I mean, certainly when I started my career in corporate Australia, we almost always piloted. We almost always went to the market with a test product, an isolated market segment, so that we didn't contaminate the rest of the market with the results of the test, et cetera, et cetera. But you just don't see it happening as much anymore. It's almost, it's been replaced by launch. Just and straight in, and you figure out that software has kind of done that. We're almost bug testing with software as we're launching it these days, unfortunately. Imagine a very motivated, very clever, younger leader who's found their cause bumping up against them and they can't avoid it anymore. Rather than organizational lessons and insights and wisdom, what are the personal wisdom lessons you would share with that young, and they might not have your experience that you'd had through a previous career, but they're motivated, they're clever, the cause matters, they can't ignore it anymore, it's burning. What are some personal wisdom that you might share with them to help them stay the course?
Yeah, I think self-belief is something that I really try to get people to believe in. Like, I think there's a lot of people that just don't have that sense of self-belief, and I think that's not a real shame. And I wonder why. I was very fortunate that I was raised in a household where, self-belief was really given to me. So I think, get the self-belief, but also do all the research. Like, I'm always researching, learning, absorbing information from everybody else that you can. Like, don't think you have to go it alone. There's a lot of people out there that will help you. So never go it alone. Get as many people around you as you can and ask questions. And then take the leap. Like I keep saying, what if we didn't take the leap? So I think if you're really that passionate about it, believe in yourself, research, ask questions, and get people around you and go for it.
Just go for
Yeah, I
it.
just go, what if I didn't? So, and that's what I'm saying. If you've got all of those things and you've got yourself, your business plan and everything, research, put it in place.
I think it's such an interesting paradigm that the consequences for the beneficiaries of what you're doing are often far greater than the consequences for the person doing the doing if it doesn't work out perfectly. And as long as we keep understanding that, that idea of going for it becomes a much more palatable thing. I'd love to, I have a number of questions that I use at the end, just some fast response questions, which are more about you and, some of the thinking, and just a sort of a bit of a fun way to finish off. So I'll ask two or three if you're up for it, just, whatever pops into your head as I ask the question. So if you could relive one moment of pure happiness from at any point in the past, what would that moment be and why?
I think it's when I'm at the beach, just walking on the beach with my family and my dog. It's the serenity of water going in and out and having the people that I love around me. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah. and dogs. I'm a dog lover, so having them around you is special. If you could, when did you have any thoughts as a child and a teenager about what you wanted to be when you grew up, and did they look anything like, what you're doing?
No, I was going to be a ballerina or a mathematician.
Right. Well, I'm glad
I
you were
like
going to be a
numbers.
mathematician. That probably
Yeah,
helps with technology.
yeah. I just love, like, I just crazily love numbers. So,
Right. I think that's probably a good thing, given what you're doing right now.
yeah.
And if you could sit inside any of the biggest conversations that have been held in the world at any point in time, like pivotal conversations, and you can sit in there as a fly on the wall and really hear what those conversations are at the time, is there one that you would love to have been able to observe?
I think I'm so confused about the economy and, why the Reserve Bank make the decisions they make. And I'm just like, between the Reserve Bank and the banks, I'm just like, I really don't think they understand what's going on in the real world. I'd like to sit there and just go, you're not understanding how the people in the real world work. So
Yeah.
to sit in on
Yeah.
some of those conversations, I think is a total disconnect.
Well, and possibly true, when you if you don't have your children sleeping on the floor, there is an element, there's potentially an element of disconnect when you deal with such big numbers. As we aggregate up, the connection to people tends to diminish in almost every domain. So it is super interesting. Alison, thank you so much for your generosity of time. And my challenge to anyone in business, particularly listening, where you have unused goods or services, and good 360 may actually be an avenue, depending on the scale. But if you have unused goods or services, point a part of your attention towards how can we reduce the wastage, and how can we turn waste into practical, super helpful benefits for people who would otherwise never be able to attain it, and often are actually suffering because they can't actually have it. And I'd also challenge all of us to think about profit in as many dimensions as we possibly can. It isn't just how much money is banked or the return on investment. I think the world more and more is demanding a greater sense of social enterprise and social conscience and social license to operate from businesses. So we can all learn a tremendous amount about thinking about how an organization like Good360 operates and provides this very complex marketplace between companies and the charities that distribute to people that need it most. So Alison, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It was a fascinating conversation to explore your journey, and I'm just going to keep watching Good360 now that I'm aware of it and the work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time and listening to our journey. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.